Hey there, and welcome to Pro Tools 101, Exercise 10. This is the last one of the book. And you'll see it says this at the end of the chapter, but I'd like you just to take the time to reflect everything you've learned so far. Pro Tools, yeah, it could be a little wonky, it could be a little complicated, but think about everything you know now compared to what you knew when you were doing exercise 1, 2, or 3. I mean, it's pretty insane. I mean, this is only halfway through the semester too, so give yourself a pat on the back. Okay. And now let's jump into exercise 10. Okay, this is going to be a big one, so get ready to settle in for this. Automated shared effects and creating a stereo bounce. So chapter 10 goes over a lot of things. Basic mixer technology, working in the mix window, using insert effects or plug-in processors, automation. We've learned a little bit about automation, and then backing up the session, and then creating a stereo mixdown or a bounce. So this exercise only covers about a third of that. So make sure you actually go through this whole chapter and just sort of like practice with whatever session that you've got open each of these steps, because this exercise only goes through a couple of them. Okay? So without further ado, here we go. Okay, as we said before, as we've been doing before, we want to open up the last exercise we worked on, which was exercise 9 dash, in my case, is exercise 9 dash KT. If you want to just start with one they've already pre-made for you, you could just go to the completed projects folder and open up the exercise 9 sample. But I'm just going to go off of what I was working with before. Okay, so mine is in completed projects, exercise 9 KT. Okay. Woo! I'm tired today. Okay. Here we go. So, when we left off before, we had learned, we cut out some, we used the shuffle edit mode to cut out a portion of these 3 tracks, and we used our markers to place the Fire Effects clip exactly where we wanted to on the Fire Effects track. Okay, so it says, first thing we're going to do is create a delay effect. Now, there's many ways to do effects in Pro Tools. This chapter goes through just placing a processor and then also making a track, a specific track whose function is to add an effect to whatever tracks are routed or fed into it. That's a really interesting way to do it. And we call those aux tracks. Remember, aux tracks are tracks that do not contain audio, but what they do is they create basically a path or a route for audio to go into it. So it's basically a track. And I could say, put a delay, put a reverb, and put a pitch shift on this track. And then I go to other audio tracks and point them to that aux track that has those 3 effects, and then those tracks feed into that aux track. It's kind of like a big filter, and then it comes out with those effects. It's actually a pretty common way for people to apply one effect to multiple tracks at once. So instead of just adding effect on each single track that you want to apply the same effect upon, you could just create one aux track, add an effect to it, and then point all of your audio tracks to that aux track with the effect. It's actually a more efficient way to use your processor when it comes down to it. So that's what we're going to do here, it looks like. Create a delay return. So first, we're going to choose track new and create a new aux input track, name it delay. And this new track will appear below the FX Fire track. Okay, so remember, when you click on the nameplate, that is how Pro Tools determines where your next audio track or track will be. So Fire Effects, track new. And this is going to be an aux input track. Let me see. Did it say stereo? Yeah, this is a stereo track. Stereo. And we're going to call this delay. Create. Boom. And there it is right there. So as a quick point, I mentioned this once before, each type of track has its own symbol. Audio tracks have something that looks like a little sideways Christmas tree. Instrument tracks have something that look like a piano. And aux tracks have something that looks like a downwards arrow, which lets you know that it's taking something in and sending it out. Okay, so we've created, let me put this out of the way here. We've created an aux track called delay. So let's see what we do next. Okay, switch to the mix window, which I've already done. Now configure the delay track. Click on the audio input path selector and select bus 1, 2 stereo. And then click on insert selector A for the delay track and choose air dynamic delay. Okay, so first, let's go to the mix window. There we go. You know, I'm going to close this transport window right now. It's getting in the way. Okay, so here's my aux track. So remember, each track has an input and an output, or an I/O. So each track, we can assign it to have its own input and its own output. So if you had a system that had different speakers, for example, you could say, I want track 1 to go to that speaker. I want track to output to that speaker. I want track 3 to output to that speaker, for example. You could do that. You could do that with the inputs too. You could say, I want track 1 to have this microphone, and I want track 2 to get the input from another track. So we can route audio signals from one track to another. That's what we're doing here. We're going to tell this aux track here, named delay, that we want the input to be bus 1-2. Now, this is what we learned in this chapter. The way you route a signal from one track to another is on what we call a bus. If you think about it like this, I think it'll make it a little easier. How do you get from point A to point B? Well, you can drive a car. You could take the subway. You can take a bus. So if we want to send a signal from one track to another track, it can't get there unless it gets on a bus. So that bus is, in this case, is going to be called bus 1-2, which is channel 1, channel 2, stereo. So just remember that. It's now looking for bus 1-2 as its input. So just remember that. Inserts right here. This is where we place our effects. We click, and we learned about this a little bit last time. So each channel can actually have up to 10 inserts. See, inserts A, B, C, D, E, and then we can actually add F, G, H, I, J. We can have 10 separate effects or inserts per channel. We're just going to keep on 5 right now because we're not really going up that far yet. So we are going to add, by clicking on it, multi-channel plugin, delay, air dynamic delay. That's what they say to do in the book. Okay, so let's see what they tell us to do. Select, okay, just like any effect in Pro Tools, there are a bunch of presets that you can work off of. That's what I like to do. I start with the preset and then I fine tune it from there because the presets are usually pretty good or close to what I want, and then I can fine tune it to what I really want. So select number 5, 2 against 3, using the librarian menu. Lower the feedback parameter to 40% and increase the mix to 100. Okay, we'll do that right now. So click right here. 2 against 3. Okay. So what did it say for feedback? It said 40% and the mix to 100. Here's where it says feedback. So what you could do is you could just double click on the number and type in number you want. But I like to click on the actual knob. I left click and then I move my mouse left and right or up and down to move it to where I want it. So it says 40%. So there we go. And here's the mix. 100%. So what this is every effect will have some sort of mix parameter or mix adjustment knob. What it means is if it's at 100%, that means we will hear the effect fully. Maybe you want a really strong effect, but you want it to be a little bit, have like a really strong, in this case, a delay or an echo. But you don't want it to be so out in front. You don't want it to be very loud compared to the original sound. Well, then I would mix the effect as to like say 50%. So the effect will still be strong, but it'll just be lower in volume. If it's at 100%, it's going to be very loud. The effect itself is going to be very loud. We're going to hear it basically front and center. If it's at 50% or lower, we'll hear it, but it's going to be pretty weak, almost kind of like a ghost of an effect. Whereas at 100%, it'll be undeniable, a fully affected, very powerfully affected signal. And then the delay knob actually has to do with the timing. Is it a really quick delay? Is it a really long delay? That's what that is. Okay. So that's what we do. Then we close the plugin window. And now we assign sends on the VO and Fire Effects track. So send selector A on the Fire Effects track. Select bus 1-2. The send window will open. Option click on the send fader to set it to 0 dB. And then do the same thing on the VO track, except for the VO track, raise it to about -9. And we'll leave that window open. So this is a lot of information, but it'll make sense. So we'll close this. So Fire Effects track. As you can see, under the inserts, we have the sends. So as you can see, we can also have up to 10 sends per track. What is a send, you ask? Well, how does a bus get from point A to point B? It needs to be sent there. So in order to send this Fire Effects track to the delay, we need to tell it that we want to send it. So we click on the send right there, and we choose bus 1 and 2. You see where this is going? We are sending this signal, this Fire Effects signal, we are sending it on bus 1-2 to an input, which is also called bus 1-2. So that way we are sending it out to this input. We will do the same thing to the VO track as well. But before we do that, you'll see that when we did this, a small audio meter setup just appeared. This is basically our send control panel. Watch the Fire Effects track. There's fire happening. And then watch the delay track. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to solo the Fire Effects track and solo the delay track so you can pay attention to the meters and to what you're hearing. What you're hearing is a signal being sent on bus 1-2 out of Fire Effects into the input bus 1-2 on the delay track. It's going out of the Fire Effects track into the delay track where a delay effect is waiting for it to be applied to it. And then from the delay track, it's being sent out to my speakers. So it's going from the from the audio source as a raw sound file into an aux track where a delay is applied to it, and then it is returned out to my speakers as an audio clip with a delay effect attached to it. So let's listen to that. Notice this is my send level. Watch what happens when I bring it up and down. What's the difference here? I'll show you the difference. I'm going to add an effect to the aux track that'll make the difference a little more obvious. Air reverb. So watch what happens now. I have it set to 0. The send level set to 0. Now let's play. You hear that reverb? Watch what happens when I bring it down all the way. There is no reverb. Watch what happens when I bring it up really high. There's a lot of reverb. That is what this send is doing. By controlling the basically the amount of signal that I'm sending to the aux, I'm controlling how much of that signal is getting affected. So if I'm sending this signal to the aux, by having this fader down, I'm saying, hey, aux channel, with your effects, I don't want your effects affecting my audio signal at all. I'm sending you to the aux, but I am not letting your effects do anything to my signal because my fader is all the way down. Or I'm like, you know what, aux track, this send bus has a little bit of power. I've given it a little bit of I've pushed the fader up a little bit, so now you can affect the signal a little bit. Okay, hey aux channel, I want a good unity gain based application of your effects to my signal. And then, of course, hey, aux channel, I want my audio signal to be heavily affected by the effects you have on your track. See how that works? That is what this is. So it's something that might seem a little complicated, and it's okay if it is, because as you play with it more and more, it's one of those things that as you do it more and more, it starts to make more and more sense. So let us just stew over that for a little bit and go on. So it says to do the same thing, but to the VO track, but we want the VO track to be around -9 decibels. In other words, we don't want the VO track to be as affected by the aux effect. Oh, let me take the reverb off of there. Now I'm going to leave the reverb on there just so it's easier for you guys to hear it. So, where is the VO? Here's the VO right here. We're going to add a send. We want it to be bus 1, 2 because that is the input of the aux track. So this knows where to send this bus over here to this bus 1-2 input. And we want this fader to be up at -9. Let's hear what it sounds like now with it down low.
Dunes and prepared. Spicoli's surf shop has the coolest beach gear, so you don't get baked by the sun. Our gnarly accessories include swim.
Okay, now let's bring it up a little bit.
Dunes unprepared. Spicoli's surf shop has the coolest beach gear.
Bring it down.
You don't get baked by the sun. Our nightly accessories include swim.
Listen to it now. Listen to it change as I bring the fader up and down.
Dunes unprepared. Spicoli's surf shop has the coolest beach gear, so you don't get baked by the sun. Our nightly accessories.
Hear that? So it said -9. I could do this all day, but it says to bring it up to -9. So I'm just going to type in -9 right there. Boom. Let's hear what that sounds like.
Dunes unprepared. Spicoli's surf shop has the coolest beach gear, so you don't get baked by the sun.
I kind of like that. So we'll leave it. Even though it didn't say to do a reverb effect, I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep it in there. Feel free to play with your own effects and add or subtract whatever you want. Okay. So now we're going to record automation and set levels. So automation is basically mixing. We're going to be playing with the basics of mixing in Pro Tools. So choose Window Automation to open the window. Option click on any enabled red automation buttons in the automation window to disable all parameters. Next, click on Send Mute to enable only Send Mute automation for the session. So basically, automation won't work unless it's turned on. So I'm going to close that. Window Automation. So as you can see, this is already turned on. So right now, nothing is turned on, which basically means that if we tried to do automation or mixing, it wouldn't work. They do this because it's very easy to screw up your whole session if the wrong parameters are turned on or off. So Pro Tools basically has this window that's sort of like a master override that lets you sort of like lock yourself out of automation, parts of automation, or just have all automation parameters open for you. It's up to you. But right now we're going to start with S-Mute. In other words, the Send Mute button. So we are going to enable Send Mute automation for the session, and it's red when it's enabled. So once we do that, then we will click the mute button in the open send window to mute it at the session start. What we want to do is let's just hit return, go back to the session start. Now remember, this is the send window. This is the send window. It's got our fader that we set to -9. I'll put it back in the mix window. There we go. And it says to mute it. So this is the mute button right here. It's now muted. Okay, we already returned to session start. And now it says using the VO track's automation mode selector, put the track into right automation mode. So as you'll see, again, the mix window and the edit window have a lot of the same features. Your solo and mute buttons, your inserts, your sends, your I/O panels, as well as this thing that says auto. So if I click on auto, you'll see these are my different automation modes. If I go to the edit window, same thing. Looks like we're going to be doing this to the VO track, I guess. That's what it looks like. Make sure we're at the beginning there. Put this right there. So it's saying to right here where it says read automation mode selector. Click on that, and it wants us to put it into write mode. There we go. See, now it's on write mode. It's turned red, and as you can see, the send window also is letting us know that this track is in write mode. So in the next series of steps, you will be muting and unmuting the send on the fly during playback. This will add the delay effect on keywords and phrases in the voiceover. Oh, interesting. I have not done this. So to practice the timing without writing automation, you can keep the track in read mode while playing through the session and toggling mute control on and off. I see. So that's a way you could practice it just by hitting play and then put put this back into read mode. And then you hit play.
It's time for some fun. Don't hit the dunes
Oh, sorry.
unprepared. Spicoli's Surf Shop has the coolest beach gear, so you don't get baked by the sun. Our nightly accessories include swimming apparel, sunblock, boogie boards.
So that's a way
and
to sort of play around with the power of turning your send effect on and off. Now, what I would suggest at this point, Reverb has a tendency to reverberate even after the effect is turned off. So what I would suggest is go ahead and just take the reverb out. Go ahead, if you've added it, take it out of the aux track right now for this portion of the exercise. To do that, all you have to do is click on the little dot to the left of where it says the name of the effect, right here. And you click on No Insert. Boop, and now it's out. Okay. So now let's go back here, do a little practice.
Summer's here and it's time for some fun in the sun. But don't hit the dunes unprepared. Spicoli's Surf Shop has the coolest beach gear, so you don't get baked by the sun. Our nightly accessories include swimming apparel, sunblock, boogie boards, flip-flops, and oversized beach towels with sand-free technology.
Yeah, see, when you click it, mute and unmute, you can hear the delay turn on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off. That's what we're going to do, but we're going to mix it so it actually like writes it. It actually writes the automation or writes the mix to the track itself. And we're going to be writing a mute, turning the mute on and off to the track itself. Okay, cool. That sounds good. So let's see what they say to do here. So we want to turn write mode on because we're going to write automation to the track. And then begin playback, keeping this send muted for approximately 10 seconds. And then unmute it just before the words baked by the sun. Re-enable it after the word sun. So looks like they want baked by the sun, sand-free technology, and stop by Selector's Surf Shop to be to have a delay effect on it. So baked by the sun, sand-free technology, and then stop by Selector's Surf Shop today will all have the delay effect happening. Okay, I'm just going to wing it. So let's do it. And here's a little trick that I don't think they've shown you yet, but it'll help you watch this while you're doing it. Each track, now this, I believe this is, just in the edit window. Each track has this tiny little icon in the lower left corner underneath the nameplate called Show Hide Automation Lanes. See that? Each track has it. So I'm going to open that up for here. This right here will show us the automation as it's happening. We're doing mute automation, right? We're doing actually send mute automation. So we want to see what that looks like. So I'm going to select that as the type of automation we're doing. See, I have the mute selected on the send. Therefore, the automation line is already down. If I unselect it, look, it goes up. Muted, unmuted, muted, unmuted. So as we're playing it, I'm going to be turning the mute on and off, and you'll see the line go up and down. And I'm just going to wing it. So you hit play. You don't need to record enable. We've done that, basically, by just turning on automation.
Summer's here and it's time for some fun in the sun. But don't hit the dunes unprepared. Spicoli's Surf Shop has the coolest beach gear, so you don't get baked by the sun. Our nightly accessories include swimming apparel, sunblock, boogie boards, flip-flops, and oversized beach towels with sand-free technology. So keep the sand at the beach and the waves within reach. Stop by Spicoli's Surf Shop today.
Not bad, not bad. I was a little early on one of those, but I'm fine with that. I kind of like how that went out. So one thing you might have noticed is the automation kept going. When you are writing automation, it will just keep going until you hit stop. Unless, of course, if you select this, watch what happens. I'm going to do it again. Let's go back to the beginning. Here we go.
Summer's here and it's time for some fun in the sun. But don't hit the dunes unprepared. Spicoli's Surf Shop has the coolest beach gear so you don't get baked by the sun. Our nightly accessories include swimming apparel, sunblock, boogie boards, flip-flops, and oversized beach towels with sand-free technology. So keep the sand at the beach and the waves within reach. Stop by Spicoli's Surf Shop today.
See, when I selected it, it stopped it at the end. That's another thing about Pro Tools. Whatever you select is what it will play or record. And when it reaches the end of that selection, it will stop whatever it is it's doing. If you don't select something, it'll just keep going into infinity until you hit stop. Just something to remember. Another thing is, you might have noticed, it wrote over what I did before. So if you did something and you didn't like it, all you got to do is select that again and then put it in write mode again and then do it again, and it just writes over it. It's like a cassette tape. It just records over what you did before. Another thing to notice is when you're done with write mode, it automatically goes into a mode called touch. Don't worry about that. We're going to get into touch mode when we're in the 110 book. But because the write mode is so... when you write something, you don't want to overwrite it just casually, especially if you did something good. You don't want to keep it in write mode and then go, woo, and then accidentally write over it again. So Pro Tools automatically switches out of write mode whenever it is finished writing automation. It just switches out of it because it doesn't want you to automatically overwrite what you've done. So it goes into touch mode, which is another form of automation, but it's an automation that does not automatically overwrite what you've done. So it's like a safe version of automation. Again, we'll go into that later. It's kind of complicated to talk about now. So all I want you to do now is, now that we've written automation, just go into read mode, which is what, as you can see by looking at the other tracks, read mode is the default. Read mode, it lets us read, or really listen, to the automation that we've done. The other thing to note is this. If you've done automation, but you don't like what you did at all, you can select it, because see how it's on its own little sub-track here? And hit delete, and now it's back to normal. But we don't want that. We want to keep it how it was. You can also draw automation with the pencil tool. See this? See, I'm drawing the mutes. See that? Obviously, I don't want to do that, but you could do that. It's pretty cool. But let's stick with what the book is telling us to do for now. So now we're going to close the send window and set the automation mode back to read mode. We've done that. So now we're going to set levels for our mix. Begin playback and adjust the levels of each track to create a clear, intelligible ad with appropriate music bed and background effects levels. Here are some suggestions. This is where you, the mixer, it's up to you to figure out how to do this. Just base it off of your ears, but remember, this is an ad, so we need to hear what he's describing above all else. So, the voiceover may be a bit low. Let's raise the voiceover fader by about 2 or 3 decibels. Great. Let's close the send window. Go into the mix. Let's bring this up to, let's see, it was on 9 before. Let's bring it up to 6. Yeah, let's bring it to 5.4. Then what does it say to do? The expand synthesizer is a bit too prominent. Try lowering it by 6 to 8 decibels. Okay, so beat wave needs to get lowered by 6 to 8 decibels. So right now it's on -3, as you can see right there. Let us lower it to 9. There we go. And then, oops, the fire is a little too loud. Let's lower it by about 4 or 5 dB. I say 4. I want to make sure I hear it. So right now it's at -0.6. Let's just make it -4.6. Okay, so now let's go back to the edit window and take a listen. Oh wait, I have certain tracks muted. I want to hear everything. Okay, here we go.
Summer's here and it's time for some fun in the sun, but don't hit the dunes unprepared.
Okay, he is still way too loud. We need to bring him up a lot more, and I think the guitar down a little bit. So I'm going to bring him up to a little bit above 0 to maybe like 2, and bring the guitar down to about -3. And again, these numbers, the left numbers under each track let you know the decibels. And I like bass, so I'm going to bring the bass up a little bit. There we go. See what this sounds like.
Summer's here and it's time for some fun in the sun, but don't hit the dunes unprepared. Spicoli's Surf Shop has the coolest beach gear, so you don't get baked by the sun. Our gnarly accessories include swimming apparel, sunblock, boogie boards, flip-flops, and oversized beach towels with sand-free technology. So keep the sand at the beach and the waves within reach. Stop by Spicoli's Surf Shop today.
That beat wave goes on a little long, so I am going to cut that out. I'm not sure what that's all about. So what I would say too is we should look at our levels. Remember, everything goes into the master. Let's go ahead and play it.
Summer's here and it's time for some fun in the sun.
Watch the levels. In an ideal world, we don't want to hit 0, but we want to get close to 0. So let's try and basically nail it up to like -3. And by doing that, we can just kind of bring up the vocals a little bit, maybe bring up the bass, maybe bring up the guitar, and maybe the fire, because it looks like we're just shy of -3 decibels. So as I start to raise and lower these individual channels, you'll see the master go up or down accordingly.
Summer's here and it's time for some fun in the sun, but don't hit the dunes unprepared. Spicoli's Surf Shop has the coolest beach gear, so you don't get baked by the sun. Our gnarly accessories include swimming apparel, sunblock, boogie boards, flip-flops, and oversized beach towels with sand-free technology. So keep the sand at the beach and the waves within reach. Stop by Spicoli's Surf Shop today.
I think that's pretty good, except for that beat wave thing keeps sneaking in there. There we go. You know what? In the interest of time, I'm just going to leave it there. But I think, at least on my project or session, I think because I was messing around with beat wave so much, it's kind of in an odd state. But if you do find that something is not working, you do have the ability to change it, delete it, or even automate it out of there. So as we'll learn later on when we do volume automation, you can actually just bring the beat wave track down gradually over time using volume automation. We're not going to do that today, but what we did up here with this, we could do down here with this or any other track by using volume automation to actually bring things up and down gradually over time. I think the best thing to do here is, because this went a little long, I just cut out that last bar, and that pretty much took care of the problem. Okay. So Last but not least, bouncing to disk. So in this part of the exercise, you will maximize the output levels for the mix using a maximizer. Then you will bounce to disk. Okay, so what happens now is when you send something to somebody, you want the levels to be as high as possible without distorting. We just did that a little bit manually with the mix, but now we're going to use a maximizer plugin to bring all the levels up to as close to 0 as possible without distortion. And it is a effect called Maxim. Pretty easy to remember, maximizer. So click on Insert Selector A for Master and choose Plugin Dynamics Maxim. Okay. So even though it's a master fader track, which has limited functionality compared to the other ones, it still does have inserts. And traditionally, you want your master fader track to have an insert specifically for adding a maximizer effect or a limiter effect to bring your levels up as loud as possible. Because you ever watch television and you notice that the commercials are much louder than the TV program? It's because those commercials are adding compression and maximizing filters to the audio to bring all the levels up as high as possible. That's why commercials are so loud. Their dynamics are pushed all the way up to the top level volume. So when they come on, you're like, whoa, that's a commercial. That's what we're going to do here. We're going to do that thing that annoys everybody. So we want the maximum effect. And it says to make our ceiling, which is the top level it will go, -0.5, which is probably just easier to type that in. And let's see what it says to do for the threshold. So threshold is how we achieve a healthy output level without making something that sounds artificially compressed. So we're going to set it between -4.5 and -7. That'll probably be just fine. I'm going to set it to -5. And pay attention to this too. -5. Okay, sorry, -5. There we go. So now let's play it and see what it sounds like.
Summer's here and it's time for some fun in the sun. But don't hit the dunes unprepared. Spicoli's Surf Shop has the coolest beach gear so you don't get baked by the sun. Our gnarly accessories include swimming apparel, sunblock, boogie boards, flip-flops, and over...
You see what happens? When you lower that threshold, it brings everything quiet up, and it basically compresses the signal to the point where it sounds really artificial and like basically almost distorted. So you don't want your threshold level to be too low. And the only real way to figure this out is just trial and error. Play with the slider until you get it to something that sounds good to you. So let's watch, and you'll see how it's pushing it up to close to 0, but it's only going to -0.5.
Summer's here and it's time for some fun in the sun.
See
But
that?
don't hit the dunes unprepared. Spicoli's Surf Shop has the coolest beach gear so you don't get baked by the sun.
So watch what happens.
Summer's here.
When I push the threshold up, it's basically keeping the dynamic range of volume at where it originally was. As I push the threshold down, it's compressing everything to make everything as loud as possible. You want something that's in the sweet spot where it does push everything up, but not so much that it sounds artificially compressed. If you watch the meters, you'll see what I mean.
Summer's here and it's time for some fun in the sun. But don't hit the dunes unprepared. Spicoli's Surf Shop has the coolest beach gear so you don't get baked by the sun. Our gnarly accessories include swimming apparel, sunblock, boogie boards, flip-flops, and oversized beach towels with sand-free technology. So keep the sand at the beach and the waves within reach. Stop by Spicoli's Surf Shop today.
There you go. That's how you do it. Okay. That's a good, strong signal that doesn't sound too compressed. I pushed it way down before so you could see what bad compression sounds like. And then I had it all the way up so you could hear what no compression sounds like. That sweet spot for me was around negative 5.5, negative 6 decibels. That seemed to deliver the amount of compression that I liked without sounding distorted. So now we're going to bounce it, last step before saving it, to a stereo file. So we want to activate the edit window. Click on the head of minutes seconds ruler, and using the selector tool, make a selection that begins at 1 second and ends at 31 seconds. Verify the selection using the start and end fields, and then we want to output the file with these parameters. Okay, so first is minutes and seconds, 1 to 31. Okay, so we want our counter to be set to minutes and seconds. And I'm going to make my sub counter time code just because I like that. So as they say here, we want to start at 1 and end at 31. And how do we know that? So I'm going to go into grid mode, set my grid at minutes and seconds, and have my grid be every 1 second. So since I'm in grid mode, it will only let me make selections on the grid. My grid is set for every second. Therefore, no matter where I put my selector, it'll be, as you can see here, right on the second. So we want to go from 1 second to 31 seconds. And all I got to do is watch this area, and you'll see you'll know where to land. There we go. From 1 second to 31 seconds, right there. So the way Pro Tools works with the bounce is, even though we've just selected this track technically, when we're bouncing, we're selecting time. We're not selecting tracks, we're selecting time. The only tracks that won't play are the tracks that are muted. If all your tracks are unmuted, then those are the tracks that will get bounced. If certain tracks are soloed, only those tracks will get bounced. Here, no tracks are soloed. Our click track is muted because we don't want that chick, chick, chick in the mix. So that is what is going to be bounced. And remember, bouncing means exporting in Pro Tools. File, bounce mix. Bounce QuickTime is bouncing your audio mix with a video attached to it. We're not doing that yet. We're bouncing the mix. And here is where we've been asked before, what if you want to export it or bounce it at different parameters? This is where you do it, if you want. Here, it's told us to bounce it at 16-bit, 44.1 kilohertz, and by default, it goes into the bounced file session folder. Good, that's what we want. And we are going to name it, let's see, My Name Surf Shop. So there you go. And we want WAV file. We want the mix source to be the built-in output, because that's what we've been listening to this whole time. We want to be interleaved, 16-bit, 44.1. We don't need to pad to frame boundary. That's not really something we're concerned with right now. To the bounce files folder. And then you're going to see this, offline. I'm going to show you the difference. There is no quality difference if it's offline or online. Unlike other programs, in Pro Tools, offline and online does not mean quality. It is the same quality. This determines the quality right here. We want offline right now. So hit bounce. Done. Now I'm going to show you the difference when we do online. I'm going to call this online online.
Summer's here and it's time for some fun in the sun. But don't hit the dunes unprepared. Spicoli Surf Shop has the coolest beach gear so you don't get baked by the sun. Our gnarly accessories include swimming apparel, sunblock, boogie boards, flip-flops, and oversized beach towels with sand-free technology. So keep the sand at the beach and the waves within reach. Stop by Spicoli Surf Shop today.
So what's the difference? First of all, it's in the Bounce Files folder.
Summer's here and it's time for some fun in the sun.
That's offline.
Summer's here and it's time for some fun in the sun.
The quality is the same. The difference is, if it's online, it gives you the chance to listen to it. Because it's like, I don't know if you've ever edited a video before, but when you're editing, you sort of get lost. You get lost in the edit, and you sort of lose perspective. And then when you're done, and then you watch the movie when you're done, then that's when you may or may not notice even more problems that you have to fix. A lot of times you'll be editing in Pro Tools, and then you think you're done, and then you'll bounce the mix, deliver to someone, and when they listen to it, they might go, yeah, it sounded great, but there's this weird clicking, and you'll be like, oh my God, I forgot to turn off the click track. Well, when you do an offline bounce, you won't know that. I mean, I'll know it, obviously, because I could see that it's muted right here. But if you did forget to turn it off, and you just did an offline bounce and sent it off to someone without checking it, then you might be in trouble. Online bounce forces you to listen to the whole thing. It exports it in real time. And that way, if halfway through you notice an error, you could stop the bounce, fix it, and then start the bounce again. And believe it or not, online bouncing in Pro Tools was actually the only way you can do it up until like a few years ago. Crazy, but it's true. Can you imagine mixing a 2-hour movie and then doing a bounce, and at the 1 hour and 55 minute mark, you'll be like, oh my God, there's a weird clicking. I have to start all over. So, but it's good because it forces you to listen to your mix one more time before you send it off. So that's the only difference between offline and online. So once you do that, told you this is going to be a long one. Once you do that, congratulations. You've finished the 101 book. So for me, what I want you to do is take a picture of your final session, send it to me, and send me your final mix as a WAV file. So for this one, I need the PTX file and the WAV file. And once I have both of those, then exercise 10 will be complete. Woo! All right. Good job, everybody. On to the 110 book.